Hello, everyone. MRJ-USA here again. Long time no see. It's good to be back and present to you all and discuss some big stuff that's been going down, not just for myself personally, but obviously, if you're paying attention to the world, it's amplifying at a higher frequency, that is for sure. So, I'm going to respond to a bunch of inquiries a lot of great people have made, a lot of friends, family, and colleagues, and students, and old students, and current students, and just um, talk about the world of public education and why, after 22 years of myself being in the classroom as an American and world history teacher, why I've decided to step away and resign from that world and chart a different path as it pertains to educational ventures. So there's a couple things that when we wrap up today, I'll let you know that's on the horizon, and things to look for in the future, maybe if you're interested. For those of you that have ever been interested in the music, we have a new album coming out. It should be out any day now, and I'll make an announcement about that. It's called Your Glory. And over the last several years, I think many people are seems to be more acute and sensitive to the spirit. More people are asking big questions on that front. I just happen to be one of them over the last several years. So we'll talk a little bit about that too as well. And ultimately, we can sum up my direction of leaving the world of public education due to just an institutional, ideological, national perspective on education and the goals that the institution of public education has now are beginning to stray so far away from my own personal convictions as an American educator that I just had to, for the betterment of all involved, I decided to step aside. And I'm very happy that I did that. And some of the new things that are happening, I'm pretty excited about. And I'm broadcasting to you from Texas today. Many of you know that I bought some land down here a while back. And looking forward to building a small house down here with my wife, and visiting right now to recharge the engine and the batteries. Got a new teaching assignment when I do return back to Illinois that I'll speak of as well. But ultimately, my approach with my students throughout my entire career is just what is the pursuit of truth, and what does it look like for you, and are you interested in pursuing truth and knowledge? And if you are, it's a fun ride. I've been a lifetime educator. I probably always will be. I think it runs in the family. Both my parents were, my grandfather as well. I care about public education a lot. Those that have worked with me know that's true. I care about young people. I care about what they're exposed to today and what people are presenting to them as truth. It's a far distant message than any message I had received when I was in a high school classroom. So I care about my country. I care about the ideals of the United States, and I want to support forces that help bolster some of those big ideas about the United States that are wonderful. And I think there's a lot of perspectives here about the world of public education that many parents, students, and other interested parties could benefit from understanding if we want to adjust the reality of things. So when I arrived down here the other day, a big long to-do list, and I decided to pull out the Bible to get started. And in my Bible study, BSF International, we are studying Matthew this year. And I stumbled on right next in the path of Matthew 14, verse 47 to 52 stuck out to me as a really neat analogy about the present current reality, not just on a macro level for the country, but also the how it pertains to the world of public education and even my role sort of within that framework. So Jesus says again, the kingdom of heaven is like a fishing net that was thrown into the water and caught fish of every kind. When the net was full, they dragged it up onto the shore, sat down, and sorted the good fish into crates, but threw the bad ones away. That is the way it will be at the end of the world. The angels will come and separate the wicked people from the righteous, throwing the wicked into the fiery furnace, where there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth. Do you understand all these things? Jesus said to the apostles. Yes, they said, we do. Then Jesus added, Every teacher of religious law who becomes a disciple in the kingdom of heaven is like a homeowner who brings from his storeroom new gems of truth as well as old. So, very interesting. If I start with the end first, my role as a teacher and as an educator, if I'm doing it in the spirit of Christ or of a godlike figure, I'm trying to do the best job I can to bring new gems of truth as well as old to the discussion of education. And the net that is being cast out into the sea of students today by the institution of public school, it's not catching the people that it's hoping to ensnare in its net. It's pushing them further away. And I think one of the big reasons that is taking place is that to achieve consensus of a moral consensus in our system requires standards. And since moral consensus is hard and right versus wrong has been redefined. The truth is subjective and can be defined by the individual. Then it's really hard to run anything with a standard or something with a policy, if you will, that's consistent. So students are just passing through that net. And in a way, it's ironic, just literally and figuratively, you know. Passing rates are up, yet IQ rates in the United States are down. With that type of like system, asking questions would be sort of, I would hope, a norm. And when we analyze this stuff, I kind of like to think of it like a doctor whose rule is to do no harm to patients, right? For a teacher, it's the similar idea of do no harm is don't lie and don't cheat. And there's the institutional interests in the world of public education. And then there's the individual that is receiving that education. What is the proper balance there? What are the nuances where individual rights, beliefs, convictions are maybe at odds with the institution? And then what is how does the individual operate to try to rectify any of that within the framework of the institution? The lines between right and wrong today have been vastly blurred, right? And morality itself and the discussion of it has seemingly been hijacked and divided by identity politicians, celebrities, media figures. We've allowed that to happen. And at times, the system has even encouraged that. The sectioning off of our values to be identified with a particular group of individuals. And, I mean, that's historically is something we need to address right away and up front. Those that want to divide people, human beings, in subgroups, whether it's race, religion, gender, however you want to divide people. The reason, I won't say the only reason, but one of the effective things that does is it keeps the people from the ability to unify into a whole and speak with one voice. And in this context, we apply this thinking to the oligarchy that we're all living as a part of. The oligarchs do not want all of us getting together and looking at what's happening with a microscope and discernment. So in lieu of the people coming together to look at that, those that are in power are doing their best to divide and conquer we the people. And that's what the forces that we are seeing right now work out. And the ultimate objective, one of the things I guess I've stumbled on, is the concept of humility via faith pursuit. And I used to use this reference in school a lot. Many of my old colleagues will recognize this. But one of the reasons I ultimately, long-term, probably had to step away from education is because I never was a bumper bowler. I've used that analogy a lot, and some people are probably laughing as they hear it, but maybe you understand. Bumper bowling as the analogy. No matter what you do or how you do it, you will end up with a net positive result at the end of the experience. You're a winner. When bumper bowling takes place and kids throw a ball, they turn around no matter what happens. they will have a positive result. And invariably, many parents will say, great job. I mean, it's just false from the start. And the two things I like to bring out to classes at the beginning of the year to try to attempt to teach this concept of humility, right? That you need to look carefully at issues, and you need to be self-critical and analyze oneself to get to know yourself. The more that we are avoiding the exposure to hard failure, the longer we're delaying the development of humility in people. And the consequences of that we're living through. What do they call this? Something about being soft today. I can't even remember what word is used to describe people that are being snowflakes. That's the one. That's the one I hear a lot, right? And some of these self-righteous snowflakes out there, whether they're adults or young people, are so self-righteous that they don't know humility. And then I would pose a question that can bring people together. A question like they could quickly teach humility. The scientific inquiry of the Big Bang Theory, or the existence of DNA as a code. Invariably, both of those I've found have been fun ones to try to get kids to see, how do you perceive the universe? How do you perceive people around you and the history that we will study throughout the course of a year? If you look at the Big Bang Theory and you believe the theory that says everything started with something about this size, and then one day or one concept of time, it just detonated or blew up, and we get the universe. And that's how 2 million species got put together with very complex DNA. And then with the DNA question, what question should follow? So your Big Bang Theory, what happened before that? Did anything exist before that? That question can't be answered with any objective scientific reason. Neither can the existence of DNA. Invariably, people ask, and should ask, where does the code come from? Who wrote the code? How is it put together? Why was it put together? Neither of those big questions can people even answer objectively. And the existence of that reality should bring people to a level of humility where self-righteousness ceases and the exploration of truth can begin. But to explain that conceptually to people could be unsettling, I guess. But we're exposing young people to a competitive world of ideas, or we're not. Okay. And the harder question has been, I don't even know if it's a harder question. This has just been a very difficult thing for teachers to try to impart upon their students, is how to be self-reliant, self-sufficient, to think for yourself outside the bounds of institutional dogma and outside the parameters of even the law. There's been many times in history where the law is an impediment to growth, all right? Even the spiritual growth, okay? We don't need to go into all the history of this stuff today. But long story short, the humanities as a discipline themselves is a hard thing to teach, because the reaction in a media-driven culture that we are is often mob-oriented and self-absorbed and reactionary by people that have consumed so much technology and input. And most of that input is by being motivated to consume all this from a material culture and media gaslighting that is taking place. And the effect of this on our conscience and on our well-being is it removes the ability to empathize and to have humility, okay? Since we can look up whatever we want to be reinforced. And the central question that could bring this stuff all back to the basics would be, what is this meaning of life? All philosophy starts there. All right. It's very difficult to explore these ideas anymore. If an idea runs counter to the modern liberal orthodoxy that the mob has created, I believe it was Dr. Robert Malone on the Rogan show, and I don't know, a lot of people have seen that. And that's a great thing. And he spoke of the psychosis of fear. And we are living through that. And the institutions are beginning to ripple, right? Because all I see everywhere from the context of the institutions that are a big part of our lives is condescending self-righteousness. And that can only come from people that already have decided that they know the truth. So why I left and the larger cultural issues going on in the world of education. Spoke a lot of those in general terms here, but yeah, the goals of the institution and my own conscience were just misaligned. And how do people perceive, right, their own education? We spoke of that a moment ago between, do you see it as there is a higher power in the universe or there isn't? Because how you answer that question will largely determine the point of view you develop and how you approach even human relations and national policy and whatever the case may be. And an authentic education is trying to get to the pursuit of that. But many people think, and for good reasons, that the means to, or that education itself is really a means to an economic end of material self-sufficiency. And today's culture highlights and stresses the importance of image and that perception is reality. That's been an institutional thing that has been told to many teachers. It isn't reality being reality. It's perception being reality. And we have been governing some of our most important systems with perception of reality trumping reality. And then we don't discuss reality. So this is another reason that I had to step away. That phoniness of image is highlighted by one fantastic example. In many high schools across the country, the Washington Post, the news source who's been settling out of court for hundreds of millions of dollars at times, has told the American people that our school is the best, one of the best high schools in the country, top 10, whatever. Most challenging high schools in America. Schools proudly display this label because it increases their image. But what they are not very honest with is that how you gain that label by the Washington Post is how many students take an AP exam at your school, percentage-wise. So the motivation to get into the Washington Post is to get kids to sign up for the test. It doesn't even matter how they do on the AP tests. It's just based on how many people sign up. Now, a little detail like that would be very easy to help a lot of people understand what's happening. But that's sort of not discussed. It's the omission of certain truths to create a narrative, which is happening all over the place and on many different levels. So that is one. There's a drive to pass students happening in the public school system. Grading has been revisited. Grading is no longer to be considered punitive in nature, that it would be making somebody feel bad for not knowing something, to make a long story short. And that retakes and no zeros and uniformity and everyone taking the same test so we can all look at the data together and we can all decide what we should do about it to teach everyone the same way so they all get the same information. This is another reason that I left. These are the larger cultural issues. And the institution doesn't as much value the pursuit of truth. The institution has, in recent times, become an obstacle to the pursuit of truth. It's actually standing in the way. The discussion of complex material, many teachers are told, don't engage in controversial subjects. Because the result of that could be an active cancel culture that exists. And many, many, many people have been affected by that. That the conventional wisdom says students should discuss ideas like this that are controversial on their own. And that teachers shouldn't be leading those discussions for fear of inputting our own perspective on things. So the institution wants teachers' perspectives to be removed from the discussion, not teaching kids what to think, but asking complicated questions using the Socratic method about how to think and expose flaws in arguments so that young people could sharpen their sword when learning how to think critically. Today, that's interpreted as a negative experience that could potentially be biased in nature. So many teachers refrain from that. That's another reason that I stepped away. When asking questions, right, about complex and controversial subjects like gender studies, the trans world, same-sex marriage, race relations, role of poverty, secrets that are just kept from the people institutionally. Anything that is particularly controversial is often avoided, and yet our entire population is having these conversations. But they don't want to have them in the school anymore because the truth is the same for everybody. It's whatever they perceive it to be. So the goals of thinking for yourself, requiring the development of your own point of view, the goals that I've had in education are to teach kids to be self-reliant so that they could think independently. It's more like the George Carlin approach. Question everything. That's what a critical thinking person does. You don't have to oppose everything to be a critical thinker. It doesn't mean that, but just the idea that you'd feel comfortable being able to question things and ask questions. So, and in the process of the skill set to do that, people need to become critical readers, critical note takers, annotate with effectiveness, write efficiently and effectively, and publicly speak. And this is the process of how to think and how to engage. Now the expectation, it seems, is growing to be obedience without questioning. And that is another reason I had to step away. Now the more systemic or systematic issues that resonate with a lot of teachers, just a list of them I'll read, right? That national, state, and local governments are impacting the direction and trajectory of education. So people that have no idea necessarily what's happening inside classrooms are dictating curriculum and policy. There is a blind obedience and allegiance of the national teachers unions of the AFT and the NEA to align politically 100% with the policies of the Democratic Party, which are for many people very divisive. And this blind acceptance that a race-baiting industry in our country that's pushing CRT and pushing controversial federal enforcement ideas like having the FBI watch over people at public school meetings is scary. And for people and American teachers that may disagree with these institutional objectives, we are shamed into allegiance with them. And this is a negative development. That's why there's so much stress. That's another reason I'm leaving. Administrative minutia, the bureaucracy, nothing, this is just regular old stuff, but the disconnect between a teacher evaluation system where all teachers today are measured by the Charlotte Danielson model. It is the only consistent name I have heard in education theory throughout my entire career. And the irony is the woman said, please don't use my ideas to evaluate teachers. That's not what it's meant for. And what exactly did happen is it is used for the evaluation of teachers. And teachers are evaluated now on if kids pass or not. So that means if you don't want to have any problem, pass people. If your pass levels are too low, the forensic understanding of why that's the case might not be happening. because data and numbers drive perception. So these are some of the impediments to honesty and truth in the public education system that people need to be aware of. We are technologied, obviously, to death. We have to learn multiple platforms. We have to have systems and data entry, which takes up the majority of teacher time. The logging in and recording of validating our jobs and inputting data to cover our butts because our words cannot be trusted anymore is another upticking of the job description and just taking lots of time. The IEPs, the 504s, differentiated instruction concepts for all teachers, learning the SEL, the social and emotional learning needs of all our kids, and to operate in a psychological environment that young people are raised in, that all their feelings need to be validated. And that concept is permeating educational leadership, that every feeling students have needs to be validated. Okay? No matter how preposterous. Okay? Because truth is subjective. So, and the final, I guess, more institutional issue that many teachers see and are a part of is the world of professional learning communities, PLCs. This bureaucratic system that is set up to have goals placed via a PLC. Well, let's step backwards. The original intent of PLCs was for teachers to collaborate to learn what systems and methods work best, share great ideas, become better in the classroom. But that has never happened in most schools, or any school we'll just say many schools. What it ends up being is a administrative time where the teachers actually do the work of the administrators, and then in a couple years they'll have to do it again. And it's really for other people to check things off lists and saying it's done at the expense of student class time. So students have less exposure to their teachers than they did when we were all in school. And that's okay, I guess, even though many of us would rather have and actually work with students in our classrooms much more. Another layer that is probably worth discussion is the educational industrial complex of corporatism and the world in that world of education. So much money from the recent stimulus concept package, federal package, is supposed to go to critical race training and theory to schools across the country, despite the fact that that is one of the most divisive subjects right now, and that the Attorney General's family is linked to corporations that produce the material that will be purchased by school districts around the country. The conflict of interest exists in not just that place alone, but there's so much money involved in the world of public education. Look at the contracts to Apple computers. Look at the College Board and getting kids to sign up for AP tests and the SAT, and then steering or altering those tests as to need and change. Well, let's just say that the College Board would have changed language on specifics that students need to address when addressing essay components to gain the credit from College Board on an AP exam that will help them gain potential college credit early. So they've begun to control the language of even testing so that the system needs to be purchased continuously by schools so that the students can learn to answer the questions the way the company wants them to answer so that they can continue to sell the product. That's another reason I stepped away. The excessive push of technology on our students, when anecdotally, I bet everybody that most modern adults talk to say that all of this technology is destroying our people. But we are doubling down on it as an institution, left and right. Every textbook is digitally delivered. Teachers can be iPad police in class. They can be tech polices. They could buy more programs that would surveil everybody's computer while in class. They can do that. Or teachers can teach. But they can't do both effectively at the same time. We're growing up in a culture where many, I would say the majority, of young people that you see out with their parents in a restaurant cannot not have technology to distract them or entertainment in their hands. And that what used to be common store rides in a car contain television programming for transit. Young people are not learning patience. Okay, they're not even learning how to be and enjoy silence. Okay, it's another reason I stepped away. So what's the consequence of all this? You know, this, what lack of a better term would be called, people saying this, that we're being dumbed down. It's hard to argue. All right. But many have abandoned the pursuit of truth and substituted entertainment for it. Yet at the same time, the energy that we feel is a culture and civilization that knows that's shallow. People are aware that that's shallow. And when you see different changes in the system where new teachers who are coming into the world of education now are taught by universities based on brain-based research that kids can only pay attention for 10 to 15 minute increments and therefore they need to change activities and rotate. It's preposterous. The most powerful people in the world can pay attention for longer than 10 to 15 minutes. But as soon as new teachers and the system accepts that 10 to 15 minutes is your max for an attention span, you've now surrendered all power that have an attention span longer than that. These ideas we can challenge and discuss, but we're in an environment where these are not allowed to be discussed. College teachers in college being training to be teachers are taught that kids today are supposed to teach each other. Yet at the same time, they're also taught that kids don't need to know anything content-wise or specifically because they can just look everything up on their phone. Okay? So if you want kids to critical think, but they're not going to know anything, what are they going to think about? To even bring these ideas up today is sacrilege in the institution. They're taking more and more content away from history courses in particular, funneling it toward uniformity, and the message, whatever it's going to be, is the message that everyone will absorb and be able to regurgitate on common tests. And the moral truths that are discoverable via U.S. history will be answered, all of them, by the people that are creating these systems. Truth has become relative, even though it's not relative. And it's not subjective. There are certain truths that exist in the universe, but I don't know them all. But when we are exposed to some, we can learn from them. If all arguments are equal and everyone's opinion matters, how can we teach discernment of better ideas? How do we teach discernment? How do we teach analysis, reflection, critical thinking? Critical thinking requires a critique. It's in the word. But when you're not allowed to critique things, or only critique can happen in one direction, then you're going to have a confused pursuit of the truth. And what is maybe getting in the way of some of this is maybe some people are experiencing this. A lot of people cannot accept that they may have been wrong about something. We'll just use the fun one right now. The Russia collusion story. It's false. Have people admitted that it's false? How do they feel about maybe believing that story for 3 years? and making judgments and determinative, critical analysis based on that. And to know that the institution itself is spreading misinformation on purpose. And to call this to the students' attention, to say, why is this happening? Why are people trying to manipulate truth? That can label you now a conspiracy theorist. So, anyway, there's so many issues, and this is another issue. It's just reflective of the challenge of public education today. This is why I stepped away. Because I still want to ask all these questions. Kids want to ask all these questions, and they want the exploration of the truth to be open. But they realize it's not. They know it's restrictive. They know it is even censored. And that is the reason there's a lot of problems with young people today that feel a sense of angst. It's why anxiety's up. That's why depression's up. That's why suicides are up. It's a combination of so many things that we all know. Too much technology, too much entertainment, a terrible diet, poor sleep patterns. And the institution can't deal with any of those. So, and the conversation of those taking place isn't facilitated anymore with honesty. So imagine trying to teach United States history today. I empathize with every U.S. history teacher across the country that to try to teach in today's politically charged climate is impossible. Avoid controversial subjects. And a lot of this stuff did not take place until the election of 2016. All cards on the table. Generally, I'm a pretty conservative-leaning teacher. Maybe you can tell already. But I had always asked my students at the end of the year, did I ever push an agenda? The answer was always, 95% no. Because my agenda only is critical thinking and to try to get to the truth. It's just harder today because many of the overt manipulations seem to be happening on one side. I'm talking about the censorship world in general. And this world of double standards, the law applying in selective situations, we know that people have been lying in institutions to us for a while. If we believe the Edward Snowden story, which I happen to believe, we're also aware that the system itself has been spying on us and has been caught lying about it, and nothing has happened about it. Okay? That's our system. That's why people are questioning it. And patterns I've seen along the way. The double standard of teachers being questioned in the world about why they would be teaching civic virtue to their students, but colleagues of a similar discipline in English are not criticized or asked questions when they teach a book promoting transgenderism. This is a double standard. The censorship of the discussion is taking place everywhere, and that is happening. There are other, elements that make teaching U.S. history today very difficult when the mainstream narrative is trying to divide the population. And the consumption of mass media by people is basically hypercharged on either side of our current paradigm of a political bipartisan system. But we're seeing words injected into the discussion like, CRT and white privilege, and toxic things, toxic ideas that are attempting to poison the well of unity of the people. It's harder to get along when these divisions exist. Here's another one that many people are going to be unaware of. That Greece and Rome are units of study in world history in many districts. Those are not covered anymore. that the removal of the foundation of Western civilization, interestingly, throughout the United States, I don't know what the numbers are on this, but in many districts I'm aware of, that Greece and Rome is no longer mandatory learning for a world history curriculum. So people might want to pay attention to that and maybe just ask yourself, why do you think that's the case? Why does there seem to be a steady undermining of the concepts of Western civilization? I think the answer is pretty clear. And there are people that are seeking to divide us want to conquer. And that's why Marxism is wrong. The status quo. What is the status quo today? It's obedience to a narrative without the ability to speak freely, challenge authority, ask questions, challenge science with new questions. You know, people have lived through this before. Galileo spent the end of his life under house arrest after threatened to be killed by the status quo for suggesting that the Earth isn't the center of the universe. So this is not unique. People that challenge the status quo will pay a consequence. And diversity of thought in the world is what we want. But many of the institutions are working toward a monolithic uniformity of thought on certain political and social grounds. It's dangerous. But the high-level achieving people of the world are realizing this is happening. And they're having to go to the private world, private market, to find solutions, to find the opportunities to pursue truth outside of the confines of the institution, as the institution has become an impediment towards the search for truth. It can be exciting if the system could embrace the concept of the pursuit of truth still, re-embrace it maybe, they could probably gain a lot of trust and respect back. But as of right now, that's not happening. The culture of trust works on every level. Parent to teacher, parent to student, student to parent, student to teacher, administration to teacher, administration to parent, administration to student. All relationships could benefit if honesty led the discussion. Okay, but it doesn't. So that's why I've stepped away. Now, my own future has been impacted in a great way. I'm very excited by all of this, experience and learning. And if you've profited by some of these stories, if it's made you think about a little bit how public education is functioning in the lives of today, and students and parents and teachers and administrators alike, carry on the conversation. But what does your conscience tell you how it's going? All right. I learned a great concept a long time ago from a dear friend about silent assertion. One of Mark Twain's lessons in teaching the adventures of Huckleberry Finn is when people know that something's happening that is wrong and they're still quiet about it, they condone it. Americans are well aware that they're living through a charade right now, but they're staying quiet about it. A lot of them are. And if good people, as Edmund Burke says, don't do anything to stand up to evil, or the only thing necessary for evil to triumph is for good men to do nothing. If good men can't even be defined anymore because there is no definition of virtue anymore, then how will people know what to fight for? They won't. Nobody wants to see anybody fight. But the idea of individual liberty and the pursuit of truth is part of the meaning of life. And if the institutions are getting in the way of that pursuit, and after you've approached the institutions with words, petitions, letters, protests, grievances, and still nothing happens, this is what Jefferson wrote about in the Declaration of Independence. This is what pushed colonists to the edge. We are being pushed to the edge right now on many fronts. Ultimately, I decided the money was not worth it to stay inside this system. Now I have been asked, ironically, to teach a class in a non-denominational Christian school to teach about Western Civ in an authentic way, to look at both the positives and negatives of the concepts of Western Civ, and to have an engaging dialogue and discussion with students about it, because this is what people still want. They're just having to look elsewhere for it. And it's ironic to think that in an institution that used to claim tolerance for ideas, the public institution, greater tolerance is actually provided today in a non-denominational Christian school toward the pursuit of truth. It's very interesting. But I'm happy and looking forward to that opportunity. People will get to speak in a less restrained environment. It's interesting. And the final irony that twists all of this into some crazy reality is the fact that a couple years back, I've been approached by an independent outfit educating English-speaking Chinese kids in American history and world history. And I have thoroughly loved it. I am on Zoom at least 10 to 12 hours a week with several different Chinese classes who kids in 3rd, 4th, 5th, on all the way up to high school, they engage, they speak fluent English, and their parents want them exposed to the same ideas that I've just been telling you for the last hour is impossible for classroom teachers in the United States to pursue anymore. So what's happening is people in the world that are paying top dollar for high-level critical thinking and the exchange of dialogue and ideas and robust conversation using the Socratic method, that's still happening in this world. And I have had beautiful conversations with 3rd graders on the impact of different American policies and views and concepts of the world that I've had in high school classes as well. So, I mean, that's the irony. Out of the communist Chinese world that we all perceive, there seems to be a greater tolerance for discussion in it. Strange. And in the United States, right now at least, the conversation and the narrative is rigidly and strictly controlled by the oligarchy, and everybody's aware of it, and not enough people are talking about it. So on Mr. J-USA, this will go to the end now. That's what I was wrapping up. So Mr. J-USA is going to be, again, launching a trial class coming soon. So pay attention to things. If you want to engage in the discussion, I know I've had a lot of old students that have reached out and asked about participating in those types of discussions, and love to do it. So there will be MrJUSA.com. It is out there right now. You can go check that out if you'd like and browse it. And soon a sign-up field will be available in there for United States history class taught by myself in the traditional method of question and answer and discussion and images and reading and an exploration of truth. So if you want to be part of that revolution, join it. Test us out. No matter where it takes us, it'll be a good adventure. What we have works in the United States: Constitution, the Bill of Rights, Western civilizations, foundation principle, one nation under God. We better return to some of those principles, because if we don't, we will be destroyed. Okay? And we'll be destroyed from within. That's all I've got. I hope you guys enjoyed that. Take care.